our next speaker is Nancy O'Malley. She is the District Attorney of Alameda County and is the first elected woman in 2010 to hold the office. She is nationally recognized expert on violence against women, sexual assault, stalking, human exploitation, and trafficking. Come on up, Nancy.
Thank you. And I think from listening to the last presentation, we understand why the Asian Women's Shelter has been one of the longest and most successful and impactful agencies, and thank you. It was really a beautiful presentation that you gave. And I think what you also did was you captured the humanity rather than just telling the story. So thank you for that. I want to talk about a few things. One of them is, I am the first woman district attorney of Alameda County. I'm proud of that fact. And yes, thank you. And the desk at which I'd sit is the desk that Earl Warren occupied when he was the district attorney and helped change, reframe America. And some of the stuff I'll talk about today is how far we have come, which does not mean we don't have far to go. But we have really transformed a lot. And just to give you a couple of examples of that, when I became the district attorney, there were 5 women out of 58 who were elected DAs. They're now 50%, which is in the country, nowhere else. We have a lot of, you saw in the last election, we elected so many women into Congress and into other branches. The only place where we're really lacking still is at our state level, because we're still only about 30% of women in our legislature, in our constitutional offices, but we're moving there. And so I want to just share a little bit when my first exposure about really understanding this violence against women, which we didn't even call it that then. But when I was in college, I was a volunteer at a rape crisis center. It was one of the first ones in California and really in the United States. And all I saw of trying to support survivors was injustice. I saw a system that treated them badly, that accused them and made them think it was their fault or they did something to ask for it, that if they ever did have the courage to go to court, that what happened in court was they were cross-examined about every sexual encounter they ever had. It was awful. And I thought to myself, first of all, why would anyone go through this? And secondly, what can I do to make that different? And I also volunteered at a DV, domestic violence shelter, again, one of the early ones. And in those days, as some remember, that they used to walk the batter around the block to cool him down, and then tell the woman that if she would just be a little bit more responsive or maybe not be so in his face, that the violence would stop. And of course, we know that's so far from the truth. So people like me, and I personally vowed that I was going to be involved in a system changing all of these paradigms around how women were treated. And part of that, I'll talk really briefly about, but also it isn't just about changing laws. It's not just about educating the community, those are essential, but it's also about having women in elective office or in positions of authority. Because there's a lot of research that has been done about what happens to government, what happens to society, what happens to communities when women are in positions of making decisions or drafting policy. And what we know is a couple of things. One, they're recognized as equal. Two, that the policies change around healthcare, around childcare, around social support systems, around all of the things that help us be whole human beings and not segregated into men are in charge, and mostly in the old days, white men were in charge. And then women were relegated to keeping the house, taking care of the kids, and doing the domestic work. So changing, this is a goal that we have, I believe we should all stay focused on, of making sure that women who have something to offer our community are women who are put in positions. The world back in those days of violence against women really favored the men. They, as I said, they try to make women be at fault, and this was back in the 1970s. I'm going to fast forward to about 10 years ago now, when I took on a project in my own county to look at for how many sexual assault kits, when a woman is sexually assaulted, or a man, it could be too, but primarily women. When women are sexually assaulted and they go to the hospital for an exam and they're able to perform this exam and have a kit presented to the police. So I looked at my own county, and we were out front on DNA, and I was like the sexual assault queen prosecutor in the state. So I thought, what, 5, 10, 1,900. And that was my county. And so that led us to look around the country. And I share this is not so much about a story about me or Alameda County, but our own strength and our own power to be activists. Doesn't mean you have to be somebody of some notoriety or something, just be activists. And what we've done since that time is we discovered there are something like almost 500,000 forensic sexual assault kits that were never tested. They were never submitted to a crime lab by law enforcement. And I used to blame law enforcement, but I don't think it was law enforcement's fault, because those are officers who investigate cases. The only person to touch that kit after the officer booked it in was a criminalist. So I started to blame the criminalists. But then I realized I can't blame anyone. Let's just change it. Blaming is a waste of time. Like, challenging people. Let's just figure out what the solution is. So our solution now is, over the last 5-6 years, we now have over $170 million in the federal budget to have local law enforcement get all of those kits out of the property rooms and be tested. And the result of that is women who were treated like they were nothing, that we didn't have to give all that we had for them to bring justice or to respect them in the way and give them dignity, now know that this country is moving better in that direction. And so my commitment always has been, and I know all of you here because we're talking about this very important subject on this very important International Women's, I'm going to call it month, is that we believe the truth is that violence against women is never acceptable, it's never excusable, and it's never tolerable. And it's also never the victim's fault. And that is an important message, because when we start looking at little kids and little girls in grade school, they already start thinking that they're lesser than, they aren't as smart, or maybe they did something wrong. So we really have a lot of work to do to get around that. I just really want to sort of add a little bit to what we heard from Diana about human trafficking. Because in the state of California did not have a law against human trafficking until 2006, and we're the progressive state. The federal government created their law in 1992. And so California just copied it. And we couldn't get our legislature to change what the federal law was at the state level, meaning they just said whatever the feds say it is what California is going to say. So we took it to the voters, and we passed an initiative back in 2012 that had the highest percentage of votes of any initiative in the history of California. That's how much the community understands what this human modern-day slavery is. And when the question was asked, why do people do that? Why do they hold someone in servitude? Why do they treat human beings like they're human ATM machines? The answer is, for many, they're sociopaths. And I don't say that lightly, because I do a lot of research around this. And the truth is, a sociopath is a person who doesn't have human empathy. It's not part of their DNA. And so they can treat people like they're slaves or treat people like chattel for their own benefit. And as Deanna pointed out, that so many of these cases, especially labor, are done in isolation and in secret, because we don't get to go into people's houses. And it's the people that are very courageous that'll speak up, like the young woman in the video did to the neighbors. We have a lot of work to do. And let me just tell you a little bit about what we've done in Alameda County around human trafficking and sexual assault. Not only have we eliminated the backlog, not just in my county, but we're working on eliminating the backlog of any untested kits so that sexual assault survivors know that they will get justice in whatever form it looks like, but that we will not disregard their victimization because it's not convenient or it's not our social priority. The second thing is, and I hope you all will support this, this will be my third time going to the legislature with a bill to mandate law enforcement to submit those kits to be tested. So we're not leaving it to the confusion between, well, I'm the officer and I booked it in the evidence room, why didn't the criminalist come and get it? Or the criminalist saying, nobody told me it was it. Whatever, doesn't matter. Everyone should get submitted. And we had no votes last year, but Jerry Brown vetoed it for unknown reasons. But we're back, and we believe Gavin Newsom will sign it. We've changed a lot of laws around sexual assault rights and raising the status and bringing equality to women in the criminal justice system, to women in our social support systems, and particularly around human trafficking. So in 1996, I had a grant to prosecute cases that involve sexual exploitation of minors. And the first case I had was a 12-year-old girl who was being trafficked. We didn't call it that, and I didn't know what she was talking about, as she described how every night the trafficker would come and literally pull her out of her house where she lived with her mother and her sisters and put her on the streets of Oakland and sell her nightly. Sometimes 10, 12 people would buy her nightly and rape her. When it came to my attention, the police had saved her, rescued her from a 50-year-old man who had paid to rape her, and the 39-year-old trafficker. Both were arrested, and I prosecuted them. And when I started hearing what this young little girl was telling me, and then we started working with adult women who were engaged in commercial sex and talking to them about, well, when did this happen for you? When did this exploitation begin? And this research that we've done in Alameda County, we now have 70% of the women that we're working with who are adult women who are on the street or in a brothel. 70% their exploitation started when they were children. So we cannot ignore the fact that we have a lot of work to do with our children to make sure that we have equality and justice for all women adults. The other thing that we've done is created a research institute called HEAT Institute. HEAT is Human Exploitation and Trafficking, and that's the initiative in my office. It's 5 components. One of them is prosecute cases, because we have to get traffickers out of circulation. And I'm proud to tell you that my office has prosecuted over 600 human trafficking cases in the last 6 years. It's wonderful. It's great. We've done over 5,000 safety plans for youth and young adult. 99% are women or girls. The second component is to train law enforcement to see what is their role in addressing human trafficking. And not everybody wants to be involved with the police, but our Family Justice Center has a human trafficking component to it, so people can get services and not have to be engaged with the justice system. The third one is to support our community-based organizations, just like the Asian Women's Shelter, to make sure that they're strong and healthy to provide services that are appropriate for that particular survivor. The fourth one is to change our policies. And since this initiative, we've changed the laws. When you change the laws and you get data, you drive resources. And there's a tremendous amount of money now committed in our community. And the last part was engaging our community. And this is the place where I'm going to come a little bit to the end, just in the interest of time. And that is that our community, as you saw on the slide, that this is not for law enforcement to solve. This is a social issue that all of us have a responsibility and a call to action. One way that we're able to do that is by letting people know what human trafficking is. In the back, you can see one of our billboards posters, which we do every January. And what Polaris Project, that runs the national hotline, tells us is that when we do our billboards, the calls from the Bay Area, which is one of the 10 hotspots in the United States for human trafficking, both of domestic trafficking and international trafficking, that those calls go up like 25, 30, 40%, because people are paying attention. So we educate the community of what does human trafficking look like, and we actually have a law. And I hope you will look it up or be involved with us. And the law was SB 1193. And it says that there's a poster that needs to be put up in certain businesses. And the poster tells people what human trafficking, what are the signs of human trafficking, what does that look like, and the big, what's the hotline number. It's designed for people who may be being trafficked, like the young woman who came out to walk the dog. If she was in one of those businesses that required the poster to be up at her time, she could have read that and said, wow, this sounds like my life. Or with girls that are, and young women and women that are on the street, sitting at a bus stop for a little shelter, looking at our bus shelter, our bus billboard thing, is they are looking at it saying, oh, that looks like me. This sounds like my life. How can I call for help? The other thing it does is people like us to read that when you go into a restaurant or into the hospital, the emergency rooms, or go to all of the businesses and look at that and say, wow, you know what? That looks like my neighbor's person who is her housekeeper who only comes out of the house once a day or something. And so really this, in my county, we created an app for our community to just plug in MAP 1193. I do this when I go to restaurants in Alameda County and Contra Costa. MAP 1193, well, here I'm at Denny's. Let me see, I don't go to Denny's, but let me put in and see if Denny's is in compliance, because I don't see it, and if it's not, I push the button that says, you're not in compliance. That will send us out to that restaurant and say, this is the law, and if you don't do it, and this is the real kicker, because most businesses don't particularly want to hang it, the real kicker is it's a $500 fine for the first day, and it's $1,000 for every day after. So we say, where would you like us to put it? And guess what? They put it up. And now we had to make our app foolproof so that businesses couldn't go through and say, green, green, green light, I'm in compliance. But I invite you to learn more about it. But in the end, we've got work to do, no question about it. But when we change the face of our leadership in this country, in our local communities, when we work together as community to right the wrongs that go on, and we insist that we have justice systems, whether it's criminal justice, civil justice, family justice, we insist that our justice systems are not prejudiced against women or against vulnerable populations, then we will change the paradigm of these crimes and bring the equality to women that we all want and that women deserve. Thank you.